everyone, and welcome to the Milkowitz family reunion. Looking out over the room, it's sort of overwhelming to see all these beautiful faces, being flooded with memories of when we were here just a few years ago, it seems. I'm so glad to be back. We come together today with our thoughts and memories of our family members who are not here. We want to especially remember those members of the family that have passed away since we were last together 4 years ago. Beatty Seklick-Levy, Rosalind Richmond, Arnold Case, Jeannie Margolis Hentel, Jerry Gottesman, John Gray, Joseph Racklin, Phyllis Shapiro, Ann Racklin, Joshua Isaac Richmond Kruger, Louis Case, S.D. Racklin Fisher, Stephen Rayfield Cohen. We also want to welcome the newest members of our family, which is Sophia Ava Richmond, and I think her new grandfather is in the room. And Karen Lim.
We have to come together.
This one is for your brother. This is Amelia Karen Lim, and this is for her. Then we have Rivka Book Zilberman. I think we have a new grandmother here. And we have Carol Shea Stansel Holly. Clara. Thank you. Now, let's hear about our family story, and we want to welcome up Albie Hurwitz to tell us how our family story begins.
Welcome to these family reunions. Actually, they began in about 1950, when there were 1 or 2 of them organized by my mother, Helen Milkowitz Hurwitz. And they were discontinued after that until 1992, at which time I called Harold Richmond with the idea of resuming them. And he thought it was a good idea, and we got his brother George Richmond and Isaac Shapiro and Lou Case to join us. And the first reunion of the modern series was 1992, right in this room here. Let us go to the family history now. As you can see, Moshe Ben Kalman, born 1735, Prague. 1780, he and his wife Sarah moved across Europe into a little village called Milkowitz. That's where we got our family name. There they set up an inn, or a kretzma. They had 2 children, the oldest of who was Yeshia. He was born in 1797, and he lived through 3 centuries. He lived in the 1700s, throughout the 1800s, and he died in the early 1900s. Here is the trip they took from Prague eastward into Milkowitz. This was part of the Jewish diaspora. For centuries, the Jews moved eastward across Europe trying to find safety. Unfortunately, they didn't. Almost every country in Europe was anti-Semitic at times and persecuted the Jews, and most of them at one point threw them out of their countries. Here is the last limb of the journey of our family, Prague to Milkowitz. Now you see, just above, Milkowitz was a little farming village. Just above it you see the word Styrobin, which is kind of a small city or a town. And through the next 100 years or so, many of the Milkowitz members moved to Styrobin, and you can see it on the shipping manuals of who came over from where. Here is the family tree. Now, out of all those units, the one to concentrate on, the vertical blue column unit, those are the 9 children of Zelig and Goldie. Here are the 9 children. Gittel Resnick was one of the 9 families that stayed in Russia. There are no known descendants. But for many years, 10, 20, 40 years, it was assumed that the Giedel-Resnick family and the Sarek-Vernick family, it wasn't known. And it was soon after, during World War II, the Nazis invaded that territory and killed all the Jews. But there's an exception which you'll hear about shortly.
Basha Milkowitz was married to David Racklin. Their oldest son, Mendel, came to America in 1902 at age 16, where he gained a new last name, Richmond. Mendel lived with his aunt Masha Milkowitz Lippman and within a year saved enough money to send for his father and brother Ed. They worked at one of New Britain's hardware factories 10 hours per day at 10 cents per hour, and a few years later sent for their family. Basha and the rest of her children, including my great-grandfather, Irving, departed Starobin in December 1906.
And now the Isaac Milkowitz.
Isaac Milkowitz also arrived in America in 1902 and came to New Britain, where his sister Masha had settled. Isaac went to work in a hardware factory and similarly earned about $1 per day, which was considered a decent wage in those days. After 3 years, he sent for his wife Hannah and their 6 children. Soon we'll hear the story of their journey and arrival in New Britain in 1906, as told by Isaac's daughter Grace. The family often got together for Passover, as you can see in this photo. There's my grandfather, Albie Hurwitz, one of Isaac's many grandchildren in the lower left.
Let's see where.
Next.
Thank you. Masha, my grandmother, was the first of the Milkowitz family to come to America. She left Starobin to join her husband, Laser Lippman, who had already settled in New Britain. When Laser Lippman left Russia, he originally planned to settle in Chicago, but after landing in Nova Scotia, Canada, he worked as a peddler and made his way to the United States, eventually coming to New Britain. The Lippmans were the official welcoming committee, as you have already heard, and once had members of 5 different branches of the Milkowitz family living with them.
Nechama Milkowitz, my great-great-grandmother, and her husband, Sam Nager, were married in Russia. They first lived in the Hartford area, but eventually settled in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, about 50 miles north. Sam had a slaughterhouse right next to the Great Barrington Fairgrounds.
Max Milkowitz, my grandfather, came to the U.S. around 1900. He worked as a peddler in New Britain, but then opened a candy and grocery store on Arch Street in New Britain and lived above the store. Max moved his family to Canaan, Connecticut, where he opened an Army and Navy store. I'm just adding a quick thing here. He lived with his second wife, Lena. Clara was his first wife that passed away. He lived with his second wife, Lena, in Canaan and maintained a fastidious garden, absolutely fastidious, as did his son, Milton, for many years after that. His last years were spent in Wallingford, Connecticut, working with his son, Milton, in an Army and Navy store, and once again had a fastidious garden, as did his son.
Minnie Milkowitz, my grandmother, immigrated to America by herself at the age of 13 in 1894. She traveled by boat from Hamburg, Germany. She shared a room with a woman from England who she didn't know and who didn't speak Yiddish. When she arrived in the U.S., her sister Masha helped her adjust, and she worked in a sweatshop sewing piece goods. One day, Minnie's future husband, Max Case, came to Sam Nager's store in Hartford, where he spotted Minnie and asked her on a date.
Yudis Milkowitz, my grandmother, and her husband, Chaim Shapiro, were first cousins. They were engaged in Russia. Chaim came to New York City in 1905 and worked for 2 years until he saved enough money to send for Yudis. They both moved to New Britain, where Yudis' sisters and brothers lived, and one of Chaim's brothers, too. That's my Father Isaac Shapiro and Joan and Phyllis with my grandmother.
We have been talking about the 7 children of Zelig and Goldie Milkowitz who came to America. What happened to daughters Gittel and Sarah who remained? Gittel Milkowitz-Resnick moved to Poland with her husband and children. Tragically, the Nazis murdered them during World War II. We wish we knew more about them. Sarah Milkowitz and her husband Itzhak Wernick stayed in Starobin. They and 3 of their 5 children, Yasha, Esther, and Masha, and the entire Jewish community of Starobin were killed by the Nazis. Fortunately, 2 daughters, Dina and Berta, survived. We are glad that Dina's daughter, Irina, is here with us today. In a few minutes, we're going to hear about how her mother and aunt survived the war and more about their family in St. Petersburg.
We must remember what happened emotionally. The 3 elders, Yeshia, Zelig, and Goldie, said at one point to those 7 family, to all 9, but to those 7 family members that came, you cannot stay here. The pogroms are such that we're being tortured and your life is endangered. And with full knowledge that they would probably never see each other again, those 3 elders told the children, and on leaving, saying goodbye, the children knew they'd never see their parents again. And now we will hear the story of one of the children who came. I have told the story in the past, secondhand information. Listen to the exact story from Grace Sicklick. As a teenager, she experienced this trip.
I very faintly remember what you told. This is Stacy, my granddaughter. Hello. They go.
Do you remember just the trip when you left Russia? To come to the United States. The Alpha Zeta came over.
I remember you told me.
He would bless you and so forth. And then tell us about that and then what the trip was like. How did you go from Milkowitz
And
to
we didn't live in Milkowitz then. Before Zeta went away to America, we had built a new house in Starobin, and we moved in the new house. And the Zayde and the Bobby and the Alta Zayde and the Alta Zayde had a daughter that lived with them. Her name was Risha, and so they all lived in Milkowitz. They were in Milkowitz. But then when we went away to America, we left our house with everything that was in it because what they used to do, they didn't do anymore because everything was taken over by different people. And so after we went to America, the Bob and the Zayde and the Alta Zayde was still alive with all our things in the house. We left it. And everything, our dishes, our everything, we didn't take. And we went away to America and they moved into our house. And they lived there as long as they lived.
When you finally left Starobin, what was your first way of transportation?
We traveled by covered wagon until we got there, and then we got off, and we came to Amsterdam by train already from Minsk.
Boy, that's a long train ride. Maybe 3-4 days of it.
Oh yeah, I can't remember how many days. But anyway, we came to Amsterdam. The boat wasn't there. We had to wait. I can't remember, a week or 2 weeks. It seems to me 2 weeks. It was like a big army. It was tables and all the people that had to go on our boat or maybe some more boats stayed there. And they used to serve every single day. They used to really serve good meals and everything, but we didn't want to eat. First of all, we were afraid maybe it's straight. My mother said she doesn't know there wasn't only Jewish people or something, but they served the most delicious herring that you could have. So my mother used to have, she had accumulated a little tin box like that, I don't know, from something that they served. and she take the herring that they serve, put it in water, and it stay until the next day or the next meal. Salt them, they shouldn't be so salty. And that's what we used to eat.
And when you came to
Then we came to New Britain.
yeah, well, tell me when you landed. Wasn't there somebody who came along with you?
There's some people that came along, I don't know where they were from, but they came to New Britain with us. We got off in Elliside. To me, they pushed you along, and they kept us, they gave bags out, pinned down some things.
Turn up on the speaker. It's the microphone. The speaker. It's maybe feedback.
But he used to get the Jewish paper, and the Jewish paper, yesterday's paper came today. So today's paper was yesterday's paper. So he saw that the boat is coming tomorrow. That was the day he saw, but we came a day earlier. And we got off from the train, and in Britain, the train, there used to be a train from Borling, get off in the Britain station. We got off, and we looked around and didn't know anybody. We just, my father was here, and his brother was here, and his sister, Naya, but they were here. But we didn't know how to get in touch with them or anything like that. So we stayed with bundles on the station, who knows how many hours, until it was starting to get late in the afternoon. A policeman came over and he looked at our tickets. We all had tickets. Come with me. Of course, it only took about 15 minutes, but he also put us on the trolley car. It went by, but after all, it cost 5 cents a person that time. So he said, come on. So we walked over with the bundles, and they came. It was in the summertime in July. And we came on the yacht. There was my father sitting in my yacht. He had an apartment all fixed for us. It makes me laugh. They didn't have, at Christmas time they have those balls like decorated. He liked that. There was such a pretty one with all different colors. He had it hanging.
After your arrival.
He all had it all fixed up with all kinds of things. He didn't know they were just a few years old. Who was up? They probably all had decorations like that. After all, the people that came, they saw those nice things that is to celebrate Christmas, and there's no harm in it. They were beautiful. So he hung out beautiful Christmas bells on the light.
You can imagine what that must have been like, going to another country where you didn't speak the language and then waiting there, and how many provisions could you have possibly brought with you? And then she mentioned that on the boat they had delicious food, but her mother didn't want them to eat it because they didn't know if it was kosher. But they had delicious herring, and her mom would soak it in water, and it was good the next day. And then she told the story about when they arrived in New Britain, there was a confusion about what day the boat was coming, and that actually in the newspaper there would be an announcement of which ships were coming on what day, but there was a confusion about what day he bought the paper and what day, when it said the next day, he thought it was the next day, but it was that day. And then they came to New Britain, and they didn't have money for the trolley, and a policeman escorted them to their new home. And when they approached, Isaac had decorated the apartment with Christmas lights. This is a long family tradition of having Christmas lights in our homes. Anyway, that he just thought they were so beautiful, and it didn't matter to him that they were a symbol of another holiday. So she mentioned that. Anyway, it's a charming story. So this is the train station that they were talking about, and this is where many of our family members, this is how they got to New Britain, to that very building So you heard that they settled in New Britain, and this is generation 2. This is the 7 siblings who came to Connecticut. They landed, and most of them came via Ellis Island, and they made their way to New Britain. And then they settled very close by to each other. So many lived in New Britain or in the greater Hartford area. And you heard that Max, after a time, moved up to Canaan, Connecticut, and Nahama Nager moved up to Great Barrington, Massachusetts. Okay, let's see what happened in generation 3. So the family grew and thrived, and those 7 became 25 from the next generation. So their children, there were 25 Milkowitz children in the next generation. And sadly, Lou Case, who passed away recently, was the last member of the generation 3. Only 2 of generation 2 survived in Europe, and then of generation 3, only 2 survived the Second World War. So here in America, the family flourished and grew, and we just had a remnant of our family that survived in Europe. So let's look here. I don't know if you can see, but the Milkowitz cousins stayed close. So you see all the dots around New Britain and Hartford. Most of the cousins of that generation, generation 3, stayed in central Connecticut. A few moved to sort of southern Connecticut between New Haven and Fairfield County. And then we had a cluster who moved to New York, New Jersey area. And here's generation 4, 5, and 6. And now you see that they're in 17 states and 4 countries. You can see we have a lot on the East Coast. Massachusetts is approaching, it's almost winning over Connecticut. I don't think it's something about our tax laws, but anyway, it's there's some draw. There's a big number in the New York, New Jersey area. We have a big contingent in Florida, and a big contingent in California. So I think that is the trend. So where is Gen 7 going to take us? We're very excited to see what you will become and where you will take the Milkowitz family. So I'd like to ask Lauren Richmond to come up and introduce another chapter of our family story.
Thanks.
Good morning. I'm Lauren Richmond. You have received many emails from me. sorry for all the emails. The committee made me do it. Like many of you, I've heard the incredible story about our Russian cousins and connecting with them before. And we're going to hear more about that in just a minute. But you may not know the 2.0 version of our reconnection, and I wanted to just mention that. In the mid-2016, my cousin Naomi Richmond received a letter, you know, it's like in paper with a stamp, and inside it was a letter, and it said, "Hello, my name is Lydia Palchon. I am writing on behalf of Irina Yakovleva from Russia, a daughter of Dina Vernick. She came to visit me and wants to find her relatives very much. Irina keeps an old letter from Naomi Richmond, who used to live at your address." And she put the address. Irina remembers her second cousin, Elizabeth Hurwitz, and Elizabeth's husband, Mark Monroe. If you know or heard of them, would you please send any information to my address for Irina? Your reply will be much appreciated. So Naomi gets this letter, and she is still at this address because she has a great house in Princeton, New Jersey, and hasn't moved. Takes a photo, emails it to about 10 of our cousins, and within about 30 seconds, there are about 10 replies to this letter about how awesome it is, and yes, how can we connect? And through that 2.0 connection, we have indeed stayed so wonderfully connected. But I wanted also to tell you something that happened to me personally this spring, and made me appreciate this story and the connection even more. In May, I had the opportunity to visit Moscow and St. Petersburg with my husband Joel, who was teaching there. And something changed. I really feel like I understand the story and the connection more deeply, and the impact of this all for us. I don't exactly know why. Perhaps it was because I was on Russian soil, the closest physical place I have to my family roots. I know it's broadly speaking and sort of metaphoric because, of course, I was in St. Petersburg, not Starobin, but there was something about being on the land where my ancestors lived. You know, my family was from here. I had made arrangements through Lydia and also through Irina's daughter-in-law, Olga, to meet Irina in St. Petersburg. And it was just mind-boggling to arrive in this super busy train station in St. Petersburg and call Olga on my cell phone and just say, "Hi, it's Cousin Lauren." And then laughing and struggling through broken English to make arrangements to get together the next evening. And then I'll never forget Irina coming into the hotel. We met in the lobby of our hotel, and she's clutching like a precious baby, like Marla's baby, the book that Olivia Moreau had created about our family. And she's holding it. She comes in the lobby, and there we are, actually, and we sit down, and the book basically served as like a tangible connection for us over space and time and language, and it allowed us to connect and see how we were all linked. I used the book and showed them how I am a descendant of Isaac and Basha, and how they're, Irina, and she was with her granddaughter Arina, our descendants of Sarah. And then Irina said to me, "So when did they come to America?" And I replied, about 1905. And I remember actually writing down the year, 1905. And without missing a beat, Irina says, "Before the revolution." And it was a really amazing moment, because that's not a context that we use when we talk about our U.S. immigrant family. And yet, of course, it's so poignant and meaningful for those who remained. So I had my computer, and we looked at slides from past reunions, and Irina asked me to point out Elizabeth, so I had to search her out in all the photos. And Irina loved the photo, which actually my brother just brought, of Isaac with me and my siblings. Isaac as an old man. And I realized that maybe she saw him as a person growing old in America, not just a box, on a family tree. So I tried to communicate, and I don't know how successful I was, that we always remembered Giddel and Sarah in our reunions. I was trying to say we're always talking about your family, even as we're beginning to fill in more and more about their branch with each passing year. And that it was truly incredible that I was sitting there with the adorable, articulate, educated, great-great-granddaughter of Zelig and Goldie, Irina, who is the same distance from Zelig and Goldie as my own children. It really struck me that we're one family, and I hope that last generation has a way to stay connected in the future. And with that, I'd like to welcome Elizabeth and Irina to tell their story.
So I am Elizabeth Hurwitz, daughter of Albert, and Isaac Milkowitz was my great-grandfather. And I would first like to tell you how we discovered that the Wernick branch of the family had living descendants. And we owe this discovery to Isaac Shapiro, son of Eudes and Hyman Shapiro. And I believe his daughter Joan may be here. Yes. Hello, Joan. Oh, and good. Hello. Yes. And so he was living in the Hartford area, and he was helping Russian immigrants by conversing with them in Yiddish. And he happened to meet a woman from what was at the time Leningrad, who was, it turned out, originally from Starobin. Not only was she originally from Starobin, but her very good friend, also living in Leningrad, was also from Starobin, and she had heard of the town of the Milkowitzes, and that very good friend living in Leningrad was Dina Vernick, Irina's mother. So he discovers this by communicating in Yiddish, and locates her and begins to correspond with Dina in Leningrad. Coincidentally, this was just a few weeks, or maybe a month or two, before I happened to be going to Leningrad on a summer study program in 1981. So I arrive in Leningrad with the address of Dina Vernick, and I simply go to her apartment. And I knock on the door, and I say, "You don't know me," in, you know, what was not very good Russian. "You don't know me, but my great-grandfather was your uncle. And he left this country at the beginning of the 20th century." And she had heard of him, had heard that she had relatives in the United States, but this was totally out of the blue. And she immediately welcomed me into her apartment. I showed her some photos of Isaac. I tried to show her and talk about the family tree a little bit. She had heard of him, but of course, he, as the second eldest of the 9, was something like 17 years older than her mother, who was the youngest of the 9. And so Dina had never met him because he left before she was born. Dina was born in 1920. 20 or 21? 20. 21. She was born in 1921, and Isaac left in 1902. So that's the story of how we discovered this branch and how I actually met them. And then Irina was there at the time. So I met Irina and her son Artyom, who was 7. And it's now his daughter, Irina, who is in that photo with Irina in the bottom left. So you get a sense of how long ago this connection was made. And I corresponded with Dina. I went back again to the Soviet Union. Maybe it was Russia by then, in 1989, and saw everyone again. And that was the last time I was there, and the last time I'd seen Irina until she came in December 2016. But I corresponded with Dina for something like 27 years until she died in 2008. Yes, 2008. 2000, okay. So that's kind of the background here. And through more recent conversations with Irina and her visit, I was able to ask her more questions, and so we'd like to share with you some of that information, and I can ask them now and have her answer. So I guess my first question was, do you remember what it was like to suddenly meet a relative from the United States in 1981? After not knowing anything about relatives in America. We did prepare a little of this in advance so that we didn't have a long delay as I struggled through translations. So she does remember when I came. She was living with her son, Artyom, in a dacha outside the city. And so I met more often with her mother, Dina. She remembers I was a slender, big-eyed girl with a mop of hair, still true of the mop part. And, when I asked, did she know about relatives in the United States? She said she had heard from her mother, but she really didn't know much. After the war, communication between Russia and the West was pretty much shut down. So Irina didn't know much about her American relatives. And so she had heard from Dina that they did receive a package from relatives of some kind from America, but she didn't know who they were. And all she remembers from that package is that there was an orange wool blanket, which they kept for many years and which she really loved. And so yes, they were incredibly surprised to hear from Isaac and then to see me. What can you tell us about your grandmother Sarah and her family? And can you relate any details you know about what they were like? She knew from the stories of her mother, Dina, and her mother's sister, Berta, Irina's aunt, that their mother, Sarah, with her husband, Isaac, and their 5 children lived in Starobin, where Sarah and the 2 youngest daughters died in 1942. They were killed by the Nazis. Isaac, the husband, was killed in 1943. Her mother, Dina, left Starobin in 1938 to study in Leningrad. She went to medical institute in Leningrad, and she brought with her a few family photographs, which Irina definitely remembers, and she has held on to all those photos, although some are of poor quality. Okay, about life in Starobin, Dina and Berta said little. It was difficult for them to talk about it in the sense of both hard to remember and painful to remember. Her grandfather, Isaac, so this is Isaac Vernick, was an important man in Starobin. He worked as a senior forester and supervised the work of several other foresters. Her grandmother, Sarah, ran the household. She was often ill, so Aunt Berta, Dina's sister Berta, as the oldest of the children, took on many domestic tasks herself. Dina was active in school, in the Pioneer Organization, and she also taught private lessons. All the children went to Jewish school for 7 years, through middle school. After Jewish school, Berta completed educational training and worked as a teacher in an elementary school in Belarus. Yasha, again, who was their brother, against the wishes of his father, did not study to be a rabbi, and instead left for Odessa, where he completed technical school. Then he moved to Leningrad and worked as an engineer. In 1935, Berta, Dina's sister, also moved there. She graduated from the Pedagogical Institute and had to return to work in Belarus. But because of the birth of her daughter, Galia, and her connections, she was evacuated to the Urals at the beginning of the war. Yasha, the brother, as a technical specialist, had to evacuate with his plant, but having learned, that's why he was not in Leningrad, but having learned of the fate of his family in Belarus, he volunteered for the front, for the army, and he was killed in 1944 in Belarus. So at this point, there are only 2 remaining members of the family. Dina, who in 1938, after finishing 10th grade, moved to Leningrad and entered the medical institute. She stayed to work in the blockaded city as a doctor, where Irina was born. And after the war, Berta, who had been evacuated to the Urals with her daughter, returned to Leningrad and then was sent to Svetlogorsk in Karelia. But in 1949, she and her daughter moved to a village just outside Leningrad. There was, at the 2006 reunion, a sort of presentation of some family history, and I won't repeat it now, but I had asked Irina to kind of verify some details and supplement, and she did report that her mother, Dina, did travel to Starobin in 1983 with some other people originally from the town. And it was almost completely destroyed. She found that there remained only a few stone houses, but she recognized the place where their house had once stood because she recognized a birch tree there. And I know that Ira, had visited Steuroben in 2006. Irina, sorry. And I wanted to ask about that visit.
В 2006 году я поехала в Старобин после того, как в Москве узнала, где погиб дядя Яша, то есть мой дядя, и поехала найти место его захоронения. Сначала я съездила в эту деревню, это в Белоруссии, не очень далеко от Старобина, а потом уже поехала в Старобин и по рассказам мамы, значит, пыталась найти места. Ну, она мне сказала, что там осталось береза, я нашла место, где стоял их дом, и нашла место расстрела. Там стоит небольшой обелиск. Еще там есть в другом месте, с другой стороны, в Старобине, камень. Сказали, что там тоже захоронены. Там расстрел был. Сначала вот женщины все в концлагерях забрали.
3000,
да.
3000.
3000 человек были расстреляны. А мужчины, они сначала ушли в партизаны. И их, все равно поймали позже, и их расстреливали уже в 1943 году. Дядя Яша, когда узнал о гибели семьи, но он и раньше пошел в армию, хоть у него было освобождение. Он должен был инженером ехать в Сибирь. Когда он был ранен, и он, когда узнал о том, что вот так страшно погибла вся семья, он и после ранения второй раз тоже пошел в армию, и погиб на фронте.
So in 2006, having received news from the archive in Moscow about the place where her uncle Yasha died, and this was because he was in the army, he had heard about what happened to his family, went back to Belarus, was killed there in 1944. So she visited the communal grave in the Belarusian village of Gadzivla, where he was killed. And then she went to Steuroben, and she wrote me about that visit in a letter. And what she had said in the letter was that she finally traveled to Steuroben, the place where Mama Dina lived during the war. The place, yes, where her grandparents lived during the war. And during the war, all the Jews there, about 3,000 people, were shot. Now, what she was just saying now was that first partisans
and the children were
sent to
killed first, and then all men were partisans. Yeah, but later they were caught by Nazis and killed a little bit later in 44.
So they started with the women and children were shot in 1943, and then...
And they have two graves for women and the children and for men.
For men, okay. And Irina visited an obelisk on a place of the shootings, yes? Which is located next to the river Sluch. And in general visited some of the places of her mother's childhood.
Yeah.
And did I miss anything else that she said?
No.
Okay. I missed a lot, but okay. And then I asked, did your mother ever talk about your Aunt Gittel?
Gittel. Ирина...
О Гитле никогда я ничего не слышала, как я понимаю, если она вышла... в общем, она уехала.
So from her mother, she never heard anything about Gittel, didn't know anything about her. Her understanding is that she went to Poland, and the Jews in Poland were killed earlier there than in Belarus, so she thinks that family was killed before the family back in Steuroben. Then I asked about life in Leningrad after the war, and she said since she was only a child, everything seemed normal to her. She went to kindergarten, played school, played sports. She, happily went to pioneer camp in the summers, and whatever kind of life or worries the adults had, she didn't notice. So her mother was still working as a hospital doctor, and Berta, her mother's sister, had by then relocated just outside Leningrad, and they were very close and spent a lot of holidays together, and they often visited each other.
And now I want to introduce cousin Sally Gottesman, who's going to tell you about our Generation 4 panel.
The question on this one is share your name, how old you are, what branch you're from, and then using 3 adjectives, please describe the oldest Milkowitz relative you remember and like who this person was and something about them, how you remembered them, what made them particular to you.
As she said, I'm Paula Racklin Gottesman, and I'm from the Bosch Milkowitz branch. 3 adjectives for the oldest Milkowitz relative I remember. I guess maybe it was my grandfather, David Milkowitz, and I remembered him as he was a farmer, he was learned, and he went to shul a lot.
Michael can answer that.
Hello, my name is Michael Milkowitz Miles.
Stand up.
Yeah. My grandfather was Isaac Milkowitz. My father was Harry Milkowitz. I knew my grandfather, Isaac. He lived in New Britain. I was the youngest of 13 first cousins. Here's one here. And in any event, we'd go over to Bassett Street quite often, well, on Sundays, see my grandfather. Adjectives, I remember him as good-looking, intelligent, humorous, and that is passed down to the generations. Thank you.
I'm Ed Case, and I am 68. I thought I was the youngest, but I'm of the Generation 4, but I'm not. So the oldest Milkowitz relative that I remember is my grandmother, Minnie. And the way I would describe her is she was un-Americanized. I mean, that's in thinking about it now. She had a very thick accent. She never learned to read or write English. She could read and write Yiddish. Going into the flat she lived in, it was like going into, I now realize, was going into a different world. I also remember visiting my Tante Judith's apartment where she had a fox stole on a coat rack. That's like a scarf, and it was a real fox with a head and a tail. It was very old world. But my grandmother was incredibly loving, and she loved her family, and there were 20 people in our family, and we would have Passover and Thanksgiving, and we would sit around her dining room table. And that's what I remember about her.
I'm Joan Shapiro Green. I'm the oldest of the 3 daughters of Isaac and Dora Shapiro. Isaac was the son of Judith Shapiro, the next to the youngest child of Goldie and Zelig. I have a confession, although I think it's been revealed already. Judith was married to Hyman Shapiro, who was her first cousin. His parents were Isaac Shapiro and Pasha Milkowitz. Pasha was the sister of Zelig, so I am a Milkowitz times 2. Both of my grandparents were Milkowitz descendants. The oldest Milkowitz family members that I remember were my grandmother, Judith Shapiro, born in 1884, and her older sister, Minnie Case, Tante Minnie. I remember my grandmother as kind and interested in me and my 2 sisters. As she got older and unable to live at home alone, she lived in the Hebrew home where my father visited her. On one occasion, I went with my mother to see my grandmother. My grandmother introduced me to her friends at the Hebrew home. One of her friends said, "Oh, what a pretty girl your granddaughter is." And my grandmother Judith responded, "No, she is not the pretty one. Her sister is the pretty one. Her other sister is the smart one, but she has a nice personality." I remember my mother and I laughed. And my Tante Minnie's story was handed down from my father to me. He said that one year at Passover, when everyone was seated around the table and the soup and the knedlich was served, my father, a young boy at the time, tasted the soup and the matzah ball and said to his mother, Yudis, "Why can't you make matzah balls like Tante Minnie? They're hard and rubbery. Yours are always so soft and fluffy."
Okay, I'm Bob Cohen, grandson of Masha Milkowitz, and she was very dear to me, but she was the glue that held the family together, and I think there was barely a Sunday that went by that we weren't at her house or one of the family houses and all together. And she just doted on all of the family, and we appreciated it, and I loved her very much.
So we actually asked the participants to either think about immigration and their lives or Judaism in their lives, either Judaism as celebrating holidays or Zionism or the impact of that. So each person chose something they want to answer about that. So the question this time that they're going to be answering has to do with either immigration or with the impact of Judaism on their lives. And Albie actually wanted to answer this.
Hi, I'm Albie Hurwitz. I'm 87 years old, and I'm going to talk about my Jewishness, which is a little bit unusual. I was born and raised in a very kosher Jewish household. Was bar mitzvah, was studying to be confirmed at the synagogue. This was World War II. And at one point, the rabbi got all those couple hundred students together and wanted to give them reassurance about all the troubles of World War II, and he asked for questions from the audience. I was a pretty shy guy, but I raised my hand. He said, "Hurwitz, what?" And I said, "If there's an all-powerful, all-loving God in heaven, why are so many innocent human beings being killed in World War II?" And he said, "I'll tell you, there was World War I, and many people were killed in it, and World War I was over, and I looked to see how people behave after World War II, and God was not satisfied, so he gave us World War II." I don't remember what my response was, but I was thrown very quickly out of that synagogue in no uncertain terms. After many letters from parents and other people, I was allowed to be confirmed. But at that point, I realized that I did not think it was likely that there was a God. No problem throughout life until my wife and I had 3 wonderful children. And when it came time for Sunday school, I didn't know what to do. I decided what I couldn't do was be hypocritical to them or hypocritical to me. I gave them Sunday school myself, Jewish Sunday school, and every Sunday there were 45 minutes for each one, and the first 30 minutes straight didactic, covering their assignments. The last 15 minutes they could do or say whatever they wanted to do. And my qualification, well, if you ask me a question, you'll get an absolutely honest answer, although I might say, let's talk about this in a few years. Things went just fine, and but it came time for Jeffrey to consider bar mitzvah. I said he should be. I could not give up the tradition of our Milkowitz family that had been going on for centuries. He took Hebrew lessons. A rabbi agreed to bar mitzvah him. After about 4 months, he said, "Dad, I got to talk to you. I think this time you haven't been honest with me." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because why were you bar mitzvah?" And I said, "Primarily because my parents wanted me. It was part of their religion and their trust and their faith." And he said, "You gave that up. And you're asking me to renew the tradition without the reasons that you had." And I looked at him and I put my hands on his shoulders and I said, "Jeff, you have just been bar mitzvah. You are a man, and you don't have to be bar mitzvah. Very quickly to the end. I said, wait 1 week to decide. He came back a week later. He said, I'm going to be bar mitzvah. I said, I can't believe it, but why? He said, because your family will kill you. I said, that's my problem. And by the way, his 2 children have been bar mitzvah.
Well, I think I'd like to share things that my father was very concerned with. I remember one time when somebody asked him, when did you become a Zionist? He said, I've been a Zionist, I got my Zionism from my mother's milk. And it has always been a part of the family tradition. And my father always worked for the Zionists, and he was president of the local chapters, and as we found out, New Britain was a very active Jewish community, particularly a lot of Zionists there. They produced a lot of the leaders in Connecticut. And I believed in what my father said. I adored my father, and he was a pretty wise man. And I tried to convey that feeling to my children, and I believe it's taken. I've got my granddaughter Lily, Archie's daughter, who is a lone soldier in the IDF right now, and my daughter Abby has made Aliyah with her husband and 7 children, and they live in Israel, and it has been a very important part of our lives, and I hope it continues in safety and love in Israel.
Well, all of us here, I believe, in number 4, the Milkowitz clan, all of us were born into a household that had either 1 or 2 European immigrants, the Straubing area, and they spoke Yiddish, and we picked up what we could. I remember an incident with my grandfather on Bassett Street. He would get the Jewish paper, and he tried showing me words, and then I heard him telling a joke, which is a little bit of a, you know that he told jokes, and there was a racy joke that I always remembered about the lachende Chaya, but I'm not going to tell it. Doesn't end so well. Well, it ends well and funny, but I can't tell it here. And the fact that we were the last generation of us and your brother Larry, where we had immigrant parents. The rest of the people born with American parents. And it's just a different way of living that we had. And the Richmond boys, 3 of them in New Britain of blessed memory, and the 3 that lived on Van Street, Elliot, Goldie, and Beatty. You know, it was all family. And living like that was just a blessed way to live. Thank you.
Okay, so when all the stuff recently about immigration came out, I got a bumper sticker in the mail, which that said, "Your people were refugees too." That said, "My people were refugees too." And I mentioned that my grandmother was un-Americanized, and I think about my father. He lived the American dream. He basically moved to a suburb. He was a veterinarian. When I was 10 years old, he bought a house on the nicest street in the town. He bought a Mercedes, which was controversial in those days. I think the way Jews in that era expressed their Judaism was to join synagogues and found synagogues. And my parents were founding members of Bethel Temple in West Hartford, and that was very important to them. And we said the Friday night blessings throughout all growing up, and my wife and I still do, and our kids still do. The other thing I have to mention is something about intermarriage, because it was very important to my father that my older brother and I marry someone who was Jewish, and I didn't, although Wendy converted many, many, many years later. And I was a lawyer, and then I started an organization called Interfaith Family, which the goal of which is to invite interfaith families to try Jewish experience, and hopefully they'll like it, and hopefully they'll want to be involved. And I think that that's just essential. I hope actually, I don't know what the open mic for the millennials are going to talk about, but I actually hope they talk about, how they feel about Jewishness also, because I think the only chance of there being Jewishness in future generations of the Milkowitz family is if it's very, very inclusive.
I'd like to discuss the family and what these reunions mean. There's an existential change from the elders, the third generation, backward, to us and to you, present and future generations. And that existential change took place because the elders, through their wisdom, courage, love, encouraged the younger generations to come here. And if they hadn't made that magnificent decision, none of us would be here. And the existential part is we only exist, whether it's here or in Europe, because of what they did for us. And this is a remembrance. And by the way, none of us here had to hide in a closet because we were being persecuted. None of us here had our families ripped apart. But we do have a remembrance of what they did. And that's why I believe these reunions are so wonderful, that we'll have a complete and ongoing remembrance of that.
Well, I think I'd like to bring in the presence of all of our ancestors. As we said, the hardships and the life that they've led in order to enable us to lead the very fortunate lives that almost all of us are today. And I think we should be humble because we have probably a lot more than any of us individually deserves, and we have it because our forefathers and mothers cared and worked, and they wanted to impart their values to us. And we talked about our Jewish values and our Zionist values, and just to leave you with one thing my father always said, is do right and fear no man.
It's hard to single out one. Of course, it's my father, my grandfather, my aunts and uncles, and I want to give a plug. He didn't pay me. Well, he only paid me a few bucks. My cousin Albert wrote a symphony, a beautiful piece of music which you can all get on a CD. You can find it on the internet. I don't know about iTunes. He didn't pay me to talk about iTunes. And it is about the struggle and what the family went through from starting in Straubing or Milkowitz to come to this country, covering hard times, better times, sad times. I would like them to remember that a horrible thing happened in the 40s, in the Holocaust. As a matter of fact, there was a book out that said God was born at Mount Sinai and died at Auschwitz. We can ask a lot of questions about that. We always do. How did that happen? But also, the state of Israel happened, and we're all here, and we remember the past, and we should remember our Judaism in the present and pass it on to our children.
This is a little hard for me because the person who I would love to bring into the room is my father. And he died in February, and he died the day after his 101st birthday. And as Albie mentioned, when these reunions got started again in 1992, I think, my father was one of the people that was involved. And he loved these reunions so much. I mean, I remember him showing me the folders and the papers. And I mean, if there's anything he would have loved to have been able to live to, it would have been to come to something like this. And the one value I think that he really stood for is he loved his immediate, I mean, he loved the Milkowitz family, but he really loved his immediate family, and he put having good relationships with his close relatives above other things. I remember he had some business dealings with my uncle, and I don't know any of the details. He felt that he wasn't treated fairly or whatever, but he never would make an issue of it. He never complained. He never escalated any dissension like that. And it was clear that he, it was so important to him that everyone in the family get along. And that's something that I don't agree with everything that my brother does or my children do, but I try to always, have that value of maintaining a really warm and loving relationship with them.
Sally asked who we remember especially who has died and who would be over the age of 75 and who we feel close to. And I feel close to my grandmother and my father, both of whom have died and would be over the age of 75. But I, like Eddie, would like to especially remember Lou Case, Tanta Minnie's son. Bea and Lou Case were part of our growing up. And when we were older, they brought us to Standard Beach in Westbrook, Connecticut. For several years, they found homes for us to rent, and we came each summer with our kids to spend weeks or months at the beach near their home. In 2010, we bought a house in Madison, Connecticut. When we are in Madison, I always think about Bea and Lou and their being part of our lives. So I think of them today.
The oldest Milkowitz relative that I remember is my Aunt Billy, Sadie Zabel, better known as Billy. And I think by way of, there were 4 daughters, and my grandfather wanted a son, so I guess Billy was in lieu of. But I hark back to my grandmother, my mother, great memories. And I had the great fortune as well to remember Aunt Minnie going out to the farm and spending a day there, and I could just run wild through the fields and with the cattle. And my Tante Eudice, I don't know why it was Aunt Minnie, but Tante Eudice, I could go to her store and she would give me a little bag and let me pick out all the penny candies I wanted. And that was a great experience. And Uncle Max Milkowitz, who was such a sweet man. I would go to visit him occasionally when I was able to. When I got my license, I would just hop in the car and go and visit him. And you could never leave there without going into the store and walking away with a shirt, a pair of pants, something. So I have those fond memories, and I would hope that some of you have advantages as well, that type of advantage with your older generations.
The next thing that's going to happen is going to be lunch.
Everyone, and welcome to Who Wants to Be a Milkowitz? All right, we've got a lot of Milkowitzes here from a lot of different stripes. Some people have more than one stripe. I'm Regis Philbinstein Bergman Gold, your host, and I'm here to go over the rules with you. Rule number 1, Regis Philbinstein Bergman Gold can change any rule at any time. Rule number 2, each team, which you've now been assembled into after much debate and talking, can pick up to 7 contestants. If you're a contestant, it means you come up here and you answer a question. It's not that hard. Each team has 2 lifelines they can use one time, just like in Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, sort of, right? Change of plans. Everyone's gonna line up. Okay, so let's do it. Here we go. Round 1, 3 questions per team. What language did our family speak when they came to America? If you get this one wrong, you'll probably never be invited back again. Is it A, English, B, Yiddish, C, Chinese, or D, Russian?
That is B, Yiddish.
That is correct. Score 1 for the blue team. All right, I need a contestant from the red team.
Red team.
The red team. All right, let's flip it to the next question. In approximately what time period did the Milkowitzes first come to America? Is the answer the A, early 1900s, B, early 1800s, C, early 1700s, or D, early 1600s? For purposes of the game, I'm going to ask my team. Okay, A. A? The answer is A, early 1900s. Red team's on the board. All right, green team, let's go. Green team, green team, green team, green team. All right, green team. Who do we have here? We have Nora Stein from Newton, Mass. That's big. That's heavy Milkowitz territory right there. Newton. Who's from Newton in the house? Yeah. Woo. All right. I hope you were listening earlier. How many children did Zelig and Goldie Milkowitz have?
I'm gonna phone my team.
You're gonna ask your team? Team, what do you think?
I'm gonna say D.
The answer to slide number 7 is D, 9 kids. There you go. All right, we're going back to blue. Up the ladder. Here we go. Blue team. Oh, it can't be Jonathan. It's someone else from the blue team. Ben, here we go. Let's go. Let's hear the question. Why do Jonathan Richman and Aaron Racklin have different last names? A, Jonathan wanted people to think he was rich. B, Jonathan changed his name to go into witness protection. C, Jonathan changed his identity after scoring a critical own goal for Hall High in the 1980 state championship soccer game. Or D, Jonathan's grandfather Mendel's last name was changed at Ellis Island when he immigrated.
Jonathan's grandfather Mendel is also my great-grandfather Mendel, and his name was changed at Ellis Island, so the answer is D. Final answer.
That is correct. So back, all right. All right, now to the red team. Oh, we have Marley here. You having a good time? Give us a dab. There we go. All right. Next question. Uh-oh. We got a baseball question. But you actually, if you were paying attention, you'll know the answer. You ready? Not that you're pretty big, your people are big baseball fans. Your dad and I were talking Red Sox last night for like 2 hours. All right. Houston Astros outfielder and World Series MVP George Springer was born in which Connecticut town that was the main destination for our family when we emigrated to the USA? New Britain. Boom. We didn't even need to look at it. All right. So let's have our next contestant from the green team. Oh, we got Lex. You ready?
Yes, I think so.
Here we go. Yiddish. If you have spilkus, it means A, you have a green thumb, like the guy with the fastidious garden. B, ants in your pants. C, perfect pitch, which I think you actually do have. Or D, fake news.
I'm gonna go with B. B. Final answer.
B. The answer is, in fact, B. It means you have ants in your pants. Wow. Perfect so far. All right, our next contestant from the blue team, please. Blue team. All right. What is the name of the present-day country where the village of Styrobin was located? Yeah, it is. A, Belarus, B, Ukraine, C, Soviet Union, or D, Poland?
I'm gonna have to, can I ask my group?
You can ask your group.
Answer is A.
A, Belarus is correct. All right. Next contestant from the red team. Red team. All right, Neil. What Hebrew phrase expresses the importance of telling our family history and passing on traditions? B. Straight out with it. Lador vador. And the answer is B. Lador vador. All right, green team. All right, we've got a duo. Some goddessmans. You ready? Ready. Let's go. Oh, this is a lot. There's a lot of reading. After many years lost to the family, Elizabeth Hurwitz met Dina Vernick, daughter of Sarah Milkowitz Vernick in Russia. Today, Dina's daughter Irina is here with us. Irina, let's give her another round of applause. Irina has a son, daughter-in-law, and grandchildren who live in A, St. Petersburg, B, Moscow, C, Starobin, or D, Minsk. And I stress that you can't ask your team. You'd like to ask your team. Team, would you like to share some input on this answer?
A.
We're going to go with A, St. Petersburg, and that is correct. There you go. And when they retire, they're going to move to St. Petersburg, Florida. All right. Next contestant from blue team.
Can I just say something? I won a spelling bee once.
He won a spelling bee once.
Okay.
All right. Who was the first Milkowitz to come to America? Is it A, Mendel Rachlin, C, Goldie Milkowitz, or D, Masha Milkowitz?
Well, this is embarrassing because I've been to a few of these and I thought it was A, but now today I learned it was D.
That is correct. Thank you for listening. The answer is D, Masha Milkowitz. All right. Next team, red. Oh, hey. How you doing? Came out of nowhere. What Milkowitz cousin has already graduated from college? You're 50-50. I'm going to eliminate answers A and C.
Okay, can I ask my team?
You can't ask your team. And you've now used your 50-50 for the whole game.
All right.
So I hope that sits well with you for the rest of the time.
Team? Which are the two left?
B, you have B and D.
Is it B or D, team?
D.
Sounds like they're saying D.
I'll go with D, Rachel.
It is D. Rachel Gray. Where's Rachel Gray? It's over there. This is Aaron. He graduated from college too. Okay. Who was the U.S. president during the years that most of the Milkowitz relatives arrived in America? Was it A, Teddy Roosevelt, B, Grover Cleveland, C, George H.W. Bush, or D, Franklin D. Roosevelt? You can also ask your team. All right, they say A. It is A, Teddy Roosevelt. Okay. What did Yeshua give each of his great-grandchildren when they left for America? Was it A, a silver coin, B, a blessing, C, some hard candies,
or D, cucumber seeds? She'd like to ask her team.
Gonna say B.
B, a blessing. Is that the answer? That is the answer. It was a blessing. The green team, all right. Albie Hurwitz. Now the questions get harder, the contestants get wiser. Here we go. This is a good one for you. Louis Case died on February 18th, 2018 at the age of 101. Rest in peace.
Veterinarian.
He was the, I'm going to read, you know the answer. I'm going to read the question for everyone, and then I'll tell you that you're right. He was the oldest living Milkowitz and last living member of Generation 3, grandson of Zelig and Goldie. And as Albie pointed out, he was in fact a veterinarian, which you may have heard during the Gen 4 panel. Getting harder. All right, blue team? Blue team. Blue team. All right, next question. Here we go. The primary reason for leaving Straubing was the rise of Hitler. It's kind of a morbid one. Pogroms, scarcity of food, or more job opportunities.
I'm going to ask my team.
He would like to ask his team.
Where's the team?
B. The answer is B. Pogroms. All right, red team, red team. Ed Case, and your father was Louis Case, the veterinarian. All right. Great. Let's go to the next question. How are Daniel Newman and Bob Cohen related? Where's Dan? Dan, you have no idea how you and Bob Cohen are related. In fact, do you know who Bob Cohen is? You have... Yeah. Here's Bob. Bob, Daniel, Bob. All right. Would you like to ask your team, perhaps? Oh, so I'll read the answers. Sorry. Of course. A, first cousins twice removed. Second cousins once removed. Second cousins twice removed. Or are they D, third cousins? What does the team think?
What does the team think?
All right, they're going with C. Let's see what the answer is. The answer is C. Second cousins twice removed. I saw them, they were doing the math back there. I saw some people going like this, doing the family tree. Okay, where are we? Green team. Green team. Next contestant from the green team. What famous singer / actress lived in the third floor apartment above Sam and Nechama Nagar's meat market? Was it A, Kate Smith, B, Edie Gourmet? Sorry guys, I'm in Gen 6. C, Sophie Tucker, or D, Carol Channing? Would you like to ask your team or use a lifeline?
Sophie Tucker.
Looks like the answer is actually B, Edie. No? That's what you wrote on the sheet. What is the answer? It is Sophie Tucker. I got bad information because it says B here. Yeah.
And was she a Milkowitz?
Maybe. No. No, you. Yeah, it says B. So, sorry. All right. Last round, I believe. Blue. Blue team. Is it Doug? Here we go. This is for $1,000,000 shekels, guys. $1,000,000. Now, I hope you were paying attention to the presentation. The earliest ancestors we can identify are Moshe ben Kaplan and his wife Sarah. Moshe was born in what year? Would you like to ask your team?
Yeah, we gotta ask our team.
Looks like they're giving you an answer.
It seems like they're telling us A. What about? All right, we're going.
They seem pretty strong on A, and the answer is in fact A. 1735. All right, we got Roz. Here we go. This is a Roz question. What does starobin mean in Russian? A, 100 rabbis. B, good blessings, which we got before we left for America, so that's good. C, a bountiful harvest. Or D, 10 fortnights. She's going to ask her team. They seem to be making an A symbol to you. So you're going to go with, who are you going to go with? Is A your final answer?
Yes, I guess so.
All right, her final answer is A, and the answer is, it's A. How many, or many of us owe our New Britain roots to Masha Milkowitz and her husband Lazar Lipman, who first settled there. Where did, Lazar Lipman disembark after crossing the Atlantic? This was actually mentioned briefly in the earlier discussion. He's going to go with C, Nova Scotia. And the answer is C, Nova Scotia. You're all winners.
I would like to call the under 40 cousins to come up here with me, and we're going to have have a little informal chat. So under 40s, come on up. Some of the things they wanted us to consider under 40s are what our family means to us, a memory of your Milkowitz grandparent or other Milkowitz relative, a memory of past Milkowitz family reunions, or your vision for what Milkowitz reunion 2030 will look like, and what you think about when you hear the word cousin, or anything else you'd like to share.
When I hear the word cousin, Nora, Julia, and Abigail come to mind. We are all within 2 years of each other, and we grew up together. They are my sisters, although only Abigail actually is, and she's here. I have never doubted their importance to me or their permanence in my life. I have known since I was an infant that we would be close forever, and I'm very lucky. Oh yeah, fun fact. The first letter of each of our names spells out Joan, which is our grandmother's name.
I'm going to speak to myself because the question was I, so there's a struggle of how the family got to me and how the family got to us, and the importance of that is to feel that, is to know that, and then to feel that gratitude, so that we can carry the gratitude with us and be in the vibration of gratitude and feel grateful that we are here, and hopefully that gratitude will then amplify all of our other experiences, because there's a knowing of where we came from because of this heritage and because we know, and so that's awesome, I think. And so gratitude is the short answer.
300 years that we've been Jewish and Judaism has been important to us, and the fact that 300 years later, across the world, some of us are now spread all over the world, that's still meaningful. I think that's impressive, and I don't know how many other people in the world can really trace their roots and the fact that they are culturally so similar to their ancestors. I think that's pretty awesome. And then also, family heritage means the descendants of all of those ancestors who are all here today, and the fact that I know among my peers, I don't know how many of them have family reunions that are this big. And the fact that our family has, to such a wide extent, been able to stay in touch and coordinate and know each other, and that I am friendly with not only my immediate family and my first cousins and my second cousins, that's a really special thing. And third and fourth even. But just in terms, that's not a normal thing in 2018. People aren't as close, people aren't normally as close to their family as the Milkowitz clan has become, and I think that's really special.
I think as far as the heritage and everything that we sort of discussed this morning is that it's cool to take a step back and see
kind of what like a radically different experience that like our ancestors had, like coming here and getting settled and like just finding a job and working in the factory for like 10 cents a day. And it's just, it gives you some perspective, not because, you know, oh, it's hard for them or easy for us. Like, we're all just everyone has a different experience, and those experiences are wonderful, and sometimes they're not. But just to sort of learn about what they went through and how, as Nate said, like, that becomes you and sort of creates the fabric that you're a part of, is something that I think just makes you like a more, you know, broadly minded person who's just, you know, more aware of, you know, yourself and the world around you and kind of, you know, how things, you know, came to be.
One of my favorite memories, I guess this is also another question, from the first big reunion that we had was actually meeting Nate, who I didn't know at the time we went to high school together, but he was 2 years above me in high school. I didn't know that he existed. And we just met each other at the reunion and realized that we both live in Newton, and we both went to Newton South High School. So then, for the next year after that, I think you were a senior that year, and I was a sophomore in high school. I felt like I had this older ally walking around the hallways. So I had like an older guy who was kind of looking out for me, and Nate helped me out a couple times. Actually, Nate recorded, it was the first song that I'd ever recorded with somebody who was working to be a producer. So that was a super cool experience too, and that all came about because of the Milkowitz family reunion. I also couldn't believe how crazy it was that I went to high school with somebody who I was related to and I didn't even know them. Like that's wild, kind of seeing how, I guess something that other people have said, how, you know, in 2018 or before 2018, families kind of drift a little bit. So it's really special that we're here. And I also just want to say, I look around and I see, you know, some of my own first cousins aren't here, which is a little bit sad, and I'm sure that there are reasons. And then one of my first cousins, one of our cousins, passed on in this past year, so he's not here. So I just wanted to, again, call Josh Kruger's presence into the room.
When we looked at the maps of where the Milkowitz lived, when they first came, everyone was clustered very close together. And by our generation, we're spread out all around the country, all around the world. And, you know, we talk about, I'm not young, but I'm not old. So I am involved with social media on some level. Yeah, I'm older than you, Marley. But we talk about how social media connects us all, and we were talking about how could we create some sort of cousins club or cousin space in that virtual world to honor Josh, but also to keep us, to make it seem as if we are all, you know, in New Britain. You know, we're all, so maybe it's a virtual New Britain. But I think it would be very, very cool, and maybe some of the younger folks who are involved in the tech sector could help us figure it out. And today, when we were sitting here, we were looking at the videos. We're talking the old DVDs that I helped compile back. What year was that, Mom? 2006. Like, I was thinking to myself, well, no one has a computer that has a DVD slot anymore. You know, they might not even have, well, you're even older than I, so maybe you do, and I do.
Some are on YouTube, I actually think.
Yeah, exactly, but maybe if we did have this virtual New Britain Cousins Club area, those things could be there. So when I want to go look, or you want to go look, or you want to go look at our past, it's there, you know? And I think that would be very cool.
I think now, I mean, for me and my experience with all you guys, like, you know, really it's like being a cousin is like kind of just like being a friend. Like I know like Nate like moved into LA, and like now I don't see Nate like that often, but I see him every few months. I'm like, hey Nate, what's going on? It's Passover. You gonna come over? You know, like, oh hey Ben, like, oh hey, it's the holiday. You coming over too? You know, like Jordan is not here, but like he's in that same, like we have our own little like LA cousin club.
And then like Dan comes sometimes randomly for work with like no notice, and he's like, "You want to come hang out?" And I'm like, "I probably can't, but maybe I can. So let's see if we can make that work." Like Doug was in town, and Doug hit me up, and we didn't end up connecting, but we almost did. But then now I see him here. But it's like I hung out with Doug, 7 years ago, but he came in town and he still had my phone number, and we still talked and connected. So it's just like you have these sort of like extra friends that you sort of see once in a while, but you still feel like close to them over the course of time.
To be honest, I find religion pretty irrelevant because we're a family, and even though we all happen to be Jewish, or most of us happen to be Jewish, it doesn't really even enter my field very much because we all have different beliefs and what that means, and even though, so I think that ultimately it's cool to hear other religions that come into the space, and also to me it feels more about being a community and a family and loving each other.
Yeah, like Nate, I certainly do not have any strong ties to Judaism. When I was younger, I taught myself Hebrew just because I liked how it looked. But recently, though, I was living in Spain, and there's a little bit known about a relative of ours that lived in a small town outside of Barcelona named Girona. And that's my next project. I wrote this book on our family when I was in 8th grade, and I don't know, it'd be interesting to learn a little bit more about that too.
Family and religion have really, in many ways, been one and the same throughout my life. The times that we would all get together, I remember there were Hanukkahs at the Gottesman's house. There were, high holidays with the Richmonds and Passover with the Richmonds. The honorary Jewish holiday Thanksgiving at Harold Richmond's house and Barbara. And July 4th. Oh, yeah. Well, not as Jewish, but it counts. I think regardless of our level of religious observance, we have cousins ranging from ultra-Orthodox to not Jewish at all. I think what still binds us all together is the cultural aspects of Judaism, the family values, and staying in touch with each other, l'dor vador, whether you speak Hebrew or not. I think by now you know what it means. I think that's what we'll all carry forward.
I just wanted to kind of remember all of the good times that I had growing up with my cousins at my grandfather's house in Connecticut. And playing baseball in the backyard and football with first and second cousins, coming to the Richmonds and playing football on Thanksgiving. And I think that's the reason that we can see each other now and be like, we still have a connection because we grew up together, and it's not embarrassing, and we're just kind of like always we can always talk, and that's nice. So.
He was always the best athlete, that's why he says that.
By next family reunion, how many new family members do you think we will find in the next 4 years? How much more heritage?
I think 25.
Yeah. 25.
Okay. This whole subject matter that Alex and others have spoken about is interesting because, as we've listened to our story, we realize that our people left where they were from because massive anti-Semitic violence was happening against them. We've also heard stories of how we've lost large swaths of our family in the Holocaust. I share some of the similar sentiments to Alex, but I also want to figure out how can we reconcile the notion that we really need and needed a Jewish homeland with feelings of maybe a little guilt about the way certain policies are affecting the other people who claim that as their homeland. And again, like Alex, I would really like to talk to some of the older generation about this and hear your perspective and learn, because I know that our relatives were big Zionists, big people, and we have relatives who currently are. We helped found the state of Israel, and I don't want our generation to be the generation that lets it go, but I want our generation to be the generation that figures out how to do it better, and anyhow, it looks like my mom's here to grab the mic, so here you go.
Thank you, and thank you, Woody, for gathering our next generation together, and thank you, everyone, for sharing your ideas with us, and we look forward to hearing more from you in the future, and I'm very excited, and I hope I will be invited to the virtual Milkowitz Village when it gets created.
We're a family and we're a tree. Our roots go deep down in history. From my great-great-grandmother reaching up to me, we're a green and growing